What if everything you've been told about ancient civilizations is only half the story? Hidden beneath the sands of time, buried in crumbling ruins, and whispered in long-forgotten tongues, lie myths so powerful they reshape our understanding of human history itself. These aren't just bedtime stories, they're fragments of lost worlds, echoes of cultures that vanished but left behind clues so extraordinary they challenge what we thought we knew. From the labyrinthine cities of Atlantis to the sky-piercing towers of Babylon, these legends aren't mere fantasy. They're the fingerprints of societies that thrived in shadows, their truths warped by centuries until now. Picture this, a map of the ancient world, but not the one you learned in school. This map is drawn in firelight, traced by storytellers who passed down tales of gods walking among mortals, of floods that swallowed continents, of treasures cursed by the divine. These myths weren't invented, they were remembered, and woven into their fabric are startling grains of truth. Why did cultures separated by oceans and millennia describe nearly identical cataclysms? How could civilizations with no possible contact share eerily similar legends of underworlds and sky kingdoms? The answers lie in 30 legendary myths, each a puzzle piece waiting to snap into place, revealing a portrait of our past far stranger than any textbook dared to suggest. This is where your journey begins. Together, we'll traverse haunted deserts where cities were erased overnight, dive into seas that hide golden temples, and decode prophecies etched into temple walls by hands that feared their words would be the last to survive. You'll hear of kings who bargained with death, of wars fought with weapons beyond ancient comprehension, and of ruins so impossibly old they predate history itself. By the time we're done, you won't just know these myths, you'll feel them like relics held in your own hands. So ready your curiosity, the forgotten world is about to speak. The tale of Atlantis begins not with a shipwreck or a crumbling ruin, but with ink on parchment, written by the philosopher Plato over 2,000 years ago. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he describes a mighty island empire, brimming with advanced technology and unimaginable wealth, thriving beyond the pillars of Hercules. Then, in a single day and night of fire and floods, it vanished beneath the waves. But here's the twist, Plato insists this wasn't a fable. He claims the story was passed down from Egyptian priests who swore it was history. So was Atlantis real, or was it a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris, lost in translation across centuries? The search for answers has spawned expeditions from the Caribbean to the Sahara. Some believe Atlantis lay in the Mediterranean, pointing to the volcanic ruins of Santorini. A cataclysmic eruption there around 1600 BCE mirrors Plato's descriptions of destruction. Others argue for the Azores or even Antarctica, citing bizarre underwater formations that resemble man-made structures. Then there's the wild card, satellite images of a peculiar grid-like pattern off the coast of Spain, fueling theories of drowned megaliths. But skeptics counter that nature loves geometric shapes too, and not every straight line is a road to Atlantis. What keeps this myth alive isn't just the allure of discovery, it's the unsettling questions buried in its core. Why do dozens of ancient cultures, from the Mayans to the Indus Valley, share stories of a great flood wiping out an advanced civilization? Could Atlantis be a distorted memory of a real prehistoric society, its name and location lost to time, or perhaps the most haunting possibility of all, that civilizations rise and fall in cycles, and we're just one more chapter in a story far older than we dare admit? Either way, the ocean keeps its secrets for now. The Fountain of Youth isn't just a myth, it's a mirror. For centuries, this elusive spring has reflected humanity's deepest fear, the relentless march of time. The legend is simple: drink from its waters and age reverses, wrinkles fade, strength returns. But beneath that tantalizing promise lies a far darker history, one of conquest, desperation, and the lengths people will go to cheat death. The story really begins not with Spanish explorers, but with the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. Long before Ponce de León set sail, the Taino people spoke of a sacred river in a land called Bimini, whose waters brought vigor and vitality. These weren't fairy tales, they were spiritual truths woven into rituals and passed down through generations. Then came the conquistadors. In 1513, Juan Ponce de León embarked on his infamous expedition, scouring the jungles of Florida for the legendary spring. But here's what most history books leave out. He wasn't searching for eternal youth, not at first. His mission was gold until whispers from captured Taino guides reshaped his quest. Suddenly, the aging warrior saw a chance to reclaim his own fading power. And so, the myth mutated from sacred indigenous knowledge into a European obsession. The irony, Ponce de León died from an infected arrow wound, never finding the waters he sought. Yet the legend outlived him, morphing over centuries into the pop culture trope we know today. Fast forward to the modern era, and the fountain of youth has taken on new forms. Scientists now study the biology of aging, hunting for genetic switches that could extend human lifespan. Silicon Valley billionaires pour millions into cryogenics and blood transfusions from younger donors, but strip away the high-tech veneer, and the core impulse remains unchanged, the refusal to accept our mortality. Perhaps that's why this myth endures, not because we believe in magic springs, but because it forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our pursuit of youth isn't about water. It's about power, the same power Ponce de León craved, the same power the Taino revered, and the same power that drives our culture's billion-dollar anti-aging industry today. Yet hidden in this ancient tale is a quiet warning. The Taino didn't just speak of the fountain's gifts, they spoke of its guardians, spirits who judged who was worthy to drink. Maybe the real lesson isn't how to live forever, but what we're willing to sacrifice in the attempt. After all, history shows us the cost. From conquistadors to modern biotech labs, the price of eternal youth has always been higher than we imagined. El Dorado wasn't always a city, it began as a man. Deep in the Andes, the Muisca people practiced a ritual so astonishing, it warped into legend. Their newly crowned king would cover himself in gold dust, paddle to the center of Lake Guatavita on a raft laden with treasures, and plunge into the waters as an offering to the gods. This wasn't greed, it was sacred balance, an exchange of earthly wealth for divine favor. But when Spanish conquistadors heard fragments of this ceremony, their minds didn't grasp spirituality, they saw a roadmap to plunder. The Golden Man became a golden city, a place where streets shimmered and temples dripped with precious metal. And so the myth was born, not from indigenous imagination but colonial obsession. The truth gets darker. As the Spanish ravaged South America, they tortured Muisca elders for El Dorado's location, burning villages when answers didn't satisfy. Survivors spun elaborate tales to send invaders deeper into lethal jungles toward jaguars, quicksand, and rival tribes. The more the Spanish suffered, the more they believed the prize must be real. Expeditions vanished without a trace, men ate their own horses, yet with each failure the legend grew, shifting locations like a mirage, first in Colombia, then Guyana, even the Amazon. The cruel irony, the Muisca's actual goldwork was breathtaking. Their artistry with tumbaga, a gold-copper alloy, created pieces so thin they floated on water. But the Spanish melted it all into ingots, erasing a culture to chase a phantom. Modern archaeology reveals a bitter punchline. Satellite scans show the Muisca did have a sophisticated network of trade routes, paths that glittered with gold dust from travelers' feet. And Lake Guatavita, divers found hundreds of golden offerings exactly where the rituals described. The real El Dorado was never hidden, just misunderstood. Yet the metaphor endures. Today, we chase our own El Dorados. Startup valuations, crypto fortunes, lottery tickets, projecting our hunger onto myths while missing the deeper truth. The Muisca knew gold's value wasn't in hoarding but in letting go. Their kings submerged treasures to keep balance with the earth. Now, as we mine the planet for profit, perhaps the most enduring myth isn't the city of gold, but our refusal to learn its lesson. The Bermuda Triangle wears its mystery like a fog, thick, disorienting, and almost impossible to penetrate. Stretching between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this patch of ocean has been blamed for swallowing ships and planes whole, leaving behind no wreckage, no distress signals, just empty water and whispers of the supernatural. But peel back the layers of this legend, and you'll find a story less about ghosts and more about how fear fills the gaps in human understanding. The myth took hold in the 20th century, fueled by sensational headlines. Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers vanishing in 1945 during a routine training mission, became the cornerstone of the Triangle's eerie reputation. Then came the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a tanker that disappeared in 1963 with no mayday calls, just an eerie silence. Add a few more cases and suddenly the world had a pattern, or so it seemed. But here's what often gets left out. The ocean is vast and merciless, and accidents happen everywhere. The Triangle covers some of the busiest shipping lanes on Earth, where storms flare without warning and the Gulf Stream's currents can scatter debris for miles. Statistically, the number of disappearances here isn't abnormal, just more infamous. Science offers less sinister but far more fascinating explanations. Methane hydrates, pockets of gas trapped beneath the seabed, could erupt without warning, lowering water density enough to sink ships in minutes. Then there's the compass variation, the only place on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, potentially confusing navigators before modern GPS. Even rogue waves, towering walls of water up to 100 feet high, have been recorded in these waters, capable of cleaving a vessel in two. Yet none of these facts stir the imagination like the idea of alien abductions or time warps. So why does the myth persist? Because the Bermuda Triangle isn't just a geographic oddity, it's a mirror reflecting our primal fear of the unknown. Ancient sailors spoke of the kraken. We swapped tentacles for wormholes. The truth is, the ocean doesn't need monsters to be terrifying. Its sheer scale, its indifference to human life, is haunting enough. Maybe that's the real secret of the Bermuda Triangle, not that it's cursed, but that it reminds us how small we really are. And in a world obsessed with answers, some mysteries resist solving, not because they're supernatural, but because the truth is far harder to accept. Sometimes nature doesn't need a reason to take. The year was 1922 when Howard Carter's chisel broke through into Tutankhamun's tomb, unleashing not just golden treasures but a legend that would haunt the modern world. As the first breath of outside air touched the 3,000-year-old chamber, the workers whispered warnings. Ancient curses carved into the walls promised swift death to those who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. At first, the warnings seemed like superstition. Then came the deaths. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, died just months later from an infected mosquito bite. His dog howled and dropped dead the same night. A radiologist who X-rayed the mummy succumbed to a mysterious illness. Journalists counted at least 11 linked deaths by 1929, and suddenly, the curse of the pharaohs wasn't just campfire talk, it was front-page terror. But let's slice through the hysteria. Modern science offers chilling alternatives to supernatural vengeance. When pathologists re-examined the tomb's artifacts, they discovered something far more tangible than curses: toxic mold. Sealed chambers like Tutankhamun's were perfect breeding grounds for Aspergillus niger, a fungus that attacks the lungs. Even deadlier, ancient Egyptians used poisonous compounds like mercury and arsenic in burial rites, which could linger for millennia in enclosed spaces. Breathing in those tomb particles might explain the respiratory failures plaguing the excavation team. Then there's the statistical reality. Most of the original discovery team lived long lives, a fact often buried under sensational headlines. Carter himself died 16 years later at 64, hardly the swift retribution of a vengeful mummy, yet skepticism can't entirely dissolve the myth's power. Why? Because the curse speaks to something deeper than logic, our fear of trespassing on sacred ground. Ancient Egyptians didn't view death as an end but as a transition, and their tombs were fortresses protecting that journey. Disturbing them wasn't just robbery, it was cosmic sabotage. Whether through mold or mysticism, the curse endures as a warning. Modern archaeologists now wear hazmat suits when opening burial sites, a nod to both science and symbolism. Perhaps the real curse isn't death but guilt. Every artifact in our museums was ripped from someone's afterlife. That uncomfortable truth lingers like tomb dust, impossible to brush off. The irony, Tutankhamun himself was likely a footnote in Egyptian history, a boy king who ruled briefly and died young. His real curse wasn't inscribed on any wall. It was being forgotten for 30 centuries, only to be remembered as a villain in his own story. Now his golden mask sits behind glass, stared at by millions who know him only through the myth of his vengeance. History has a dark sense of humor. The pharaohs warned that disturbing the dead would bring chaos. They just never imagined it would be the chaos of their own legacy, twisted into something they wouldn't recognize. The vanishing of the Roanoke colony isn't just America's oldest cold case, it's a riddle carved into a tree. In 1587, over 100 English settlers landed on Roanoke Island, led by John White. When White returned from a supply trip to England 3 years later, he found the colony deserted. No bodies, no battle scars, just 2 cryptic clues, the word Croatoan carved into a post and crow etched into a tree. The settlers had vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind only a name that would echo through centuries of speculation. Archaeology offers tantalizing fragments of what might have happened. Recent digs on Hatteras Island, historically Croatoan territory, uncovered a 16th century signet ring, gun flints, and English copper pellets mixed with indigenous artifacts. These weren't random losses, they were evidence of sustained contact. Meanwhile, soil analysis at the original Roanoke site suggests the settlers didn't flee in panic. They dismantled their homes methodically, as if planning to relocate. The most compelling theory, facing starvation, the colonists split into smaller groups and assimilated with the Croatoan people, a peaceful tribe known to trade with Europeans. But not all theories point to peaceful integration. Some accounts from later Jamestown settlers mention rumors of a massacre, with survivors taken captive by rival tribes. Others suggest the colonists attempted to sail back to England and were lost at sea. Then there's the wild card, a map hidden in the British Museum for centuries, recently revealed to have a tiny patch covering the symbol of a fort inland. Was this their intended destination? The true horror of Roanoke isn't the mystery, it's what the myth obscures. The Croatoan weren't villains, they were victims of European diseases and encroachment. By focusing on lost colonists, we erase the indigenous perspective, a people who likely sheltered strangers only to be later demonized in colonial folklore. Perhaps the real tragedy is that we've spent 4 centuries searching for ghosts while ignoring the living descendants who still carry fragments of this story. The Roanoke colony didn't disappear, it simply became part of a narrative too uncomfortable to tell. The Voynich Manuscript doesn't just resist translation, it mocks it. Discovered in 1912 by bookseller Wilfred Voynich, this 240-page medieval codex is written in a script unlike any known language, brimming with illustrations of alien plants, naked women bathing in green liquid, and astrological diagrams that defy interpretation. For over a century, cryptographers, linguists, and even wartime codebreakers have attacked its pages like a puzzle box, only to walk away empty-handed. But here's where the mystery deepens. Carbon dating places its vellum between 1404 and 1438, yet its authorship and purpose remain utterly opaque. Was it an elaborate hoax, a lost language, or something far stranger? The manuscript's bizarre imagery fuels endless theories. Some pages burst with botanical drawings of plants that don't match any known species, roots like twisted serpents, leaves with impossible vein patterns. Others show zodiac wheels with unfamiliar constellations and pipeline diagrams resembling cellular biology centuries before microscopes existed. Most haunting are the nymph pages, dozens of plump, nude figures wading through interconnected pools of emerald fluid, their purpose as inscrutable as the text itself. This isn't just a book, it's a snapshot of a mind or a culture operating on rules we can't grasp. Enter artificial intelligence. In 2019, researchers fed the manuscript's text into algorithms trained to recognize linguistic patterns. The results were staggering. The AI suggested the writing might be encoded Hebrew, with words alphabet shifted and vowels removed. Suddenly, phrases like "she spoke to the priest" and "farmer light small" emerged from the chaos. Skeptics pounced. Hebrew scholars found no meaningful syntax, and the method could force coherence from randomness. But the real breakthrough came in 2021, when another team used statistical analysis to propose the text wasn't language at all, but a sophisticated cipher for medieval Chinese. The debate rages on, with each new theory peeling back a layer only to reveal another enigma. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility isn't that the manuscript can't be decoded, but that it was never meant to be. Alchemists of the era often wrote in deliberate obscurity, guarding secrets from the uninitiated. Or consider the tulip-like flowers drawn throughout. Their bulbs resemble hallucinogenic plants used in shamanic rituals. Could this be a trip diary, its language actually the scribbled impressions of altered consciousness? We may never know. The Voynich Manuscript endures not as a puzzle to solve, but as a mirror reflecting our own obsession with answers. Every generation projects its tools onto it, from Renaissance astrology to modern machine learning, and every generation walks away with more questions than they started with. Some doors, it seems, are meant to stay locked. The Nazca lines aren't just drawings, they're a desert scream frozen in time. Stretching across 200 square miles of Peru's arid plateau, these colossal geoglyphs depict spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and geometric shapes so vast they only make sense from the sky. Etched between 500 BCE and 500 CE by the Nazca culture, their purpose has fueled wild theories, alien landing strips, astronomical calendars, or even a prehistoric subway map. But the truth lies where it always does, somewhere between the sensational and the scholarly. Start with the how. The Nazca didn't need extraterrestrial help to create these marvels, just patience and physics. By removing the dark, iron-rich top layer of desert pavement, they exposed the lighter sand beneath, creating lines that resist erosion in one of Earth's driest climates. Wind sweeps away loose particles, but the compacted soil underneath stays untouched. Teams likely used simple ropes and stakes to scale up small designs. Archaeologists have found wooden stakes still embedded near some figures. The real magic: perspective. The Nazca understood how to distort shapes so they'd appear proportional when viewed from nearby hills, their version of anamorphic art centuries before the Renaissance. Then comes the why. The alien runway theory, popularized in the 1960s, crumbles under scrutiny. Why would advanced beings need markings visible only from above? More plausible is the water connection. Many lines point to underground aquifers, and the spider motif mirrors a local rain-bringing deity. Others argue the glyphs were ceremonial paths walked during rituals to invoke fertility or rainfall. New research suggests something even more profound. The Nazca might have used these trails to communicate with their gods, treating the desert as a living canvas where humans and deities co-created. Preservation poses its own puzzles. The same conditions that kept the lines intact, minimal rain and wind patterns, now threaten them. Illegal mining and off-road vehicles have scarred some sections, while climate change brings erratic weather. Yet the desert fights back. In 2014, a sandstorm miraculously uncovered previously unknown lines, as if the Earth itself refuses to let the Nazca's message die. What lingers isn't just mystery, it's humility. These lines weren't meant for us. They were conversations with the divine, now overheard by satellites and drones. The Nazca remind us that not all art is for human eyes. Some creations speak to something older, something louder than history. And in that silence between the lines, we hear an echo. Greatness doesn't require technology, just vision. And maybe, just maybe, the courage to etch your faith into the skin of the earth. The crystal skulls of the ancient Maya should have been impossible to carve. Perfectly proportioned, with jawbones that move like real bone and optical prisms hidden in the eye sockets, these eerie artifacts first surfaced in the 19th century, touted as relics of a lost civilization. Dealers claimed they were thousands of years old, crafted by Mesoamerican hands using techniques modern science couldn't replicate. There was just one problem: every single one was a fake. Archaeologists began unraveling the deception in the 1990s, using electron microscopes to examine tool marks invisible to the naked eye. The verdict: rotary wheels, a technology the Maya never had. The skulls showed evidence of modern jewelers' abrasives, their surfaces polished with 20th century diamond dust. Even more damning, the quartz crystal itself originated in Madagascar and Brazil, far from ancient Mayan trade routes. The British Museum and Smithsonian tested their skulls, expecting mystical anomalies. Instead, they got receipts. Tax records showed one was purchased in Germany in 1867, carved by European lapidaries who catered to wealthy collectors hungry for exotic curiosities. But why did this hoax persist for over a century? Blame the perfect storm of colonial exoticism and Hollywood fantasy. Early explorers like Frederick Mitchell Hedges, who discovered the most famous skull in 1924, fed the public's craving for lost cities and forgotten wisdom. His daughter claimed the skull glowed blue when placed near moonlight and could project visions of the past. Never mind that his own expedition photos showed the skull mysteriously appearing years after their return. By the time Indiana Jones dragged a crystal skull into theaters in 2008, the myth had ossified into pop culture fact, overshadowing the real marvel, actual Mayan artistry. What makes this myth so seductive isn't just the lies, it's the truth it obscures. The Maya did work wonders with jade, a stone harder than steel, using reed drills and sand to carve intricate death masks. Their astronomers tracked Venus with naked eye precision, and their pyramids aligned with solstice sunrises, yet we'd rather chase crystal fantasies than grapple with their real achievements. Perhaps the skull's greatest trick was making us look away, distracted by shimmering illusions, while the true genius of an ancient civilization waited in plain sight. Today, the skulls sit in museum cases with corrected labels. Their stories were written, but they still whisper a question: why do we need our history to be magical? The answer might lie in their cold, flawless surfaces, reflecting not ancient secrets but our own longing for a world more mysterious than the one we've made. The first sighting struck like a bolt from the blue, literally. On a chilly November night in 1966, two young couples driving near Point Pleasant, West Virginia, swore they saw a 7-foot-tall creature with glowing red eyes and massive wings folded against its back. It wasn't just the size that froze their blood. According to their police report, the thing followed their car at speeds topping 100 miles per hour, gliding effortlessly above the treetops without a single flap of its wings. Within weeks, more witnesses came forward: a fire chief, a dentist, even a group of gravediggers, all describing the same nightmare: a winged humanoid with a 10-foot wingspan and eyes that burned like hot coals. But the real terror came when the Mothman wasn't just seen, it was blamed. 13 months after the sightings began, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour, plunging 46 cars into the Ohio River. Among the wreckage, whispers spread. The Mothman had been spotted on the bridge's cables just before it fell. Never mind that engineers later traced the disaster to a single corroded eyebar the legend had already fused with tragedy. Cryptozoologists seized on the connection, arguing the creature was a harbinger of doom, an omen woven into the fabric of Appalachian folklore long before modern sightings. Dig deeper and you'll find eerie parallels. The Shawnee spoke of the pale crawler, a winged spirit that appeared before great calamities. Even earlier, Cherokee legends warned of the Spearfinger, a shapeshifter whose presence foretold death. Yet for all its supernatural aura, the Mothman might have shockingly mundane roots. Sandhill cranes, standing 5 feet tall with red facial markings, migrate through West Virginia in late fall, the same time frame as the initial sightings. Under stress, their eyes can reflect light like a cat's, and their wing beats produce an unnerving, almost mechanical hum. Combine low light conditions with adrenaline, and the mind fills in the gaps. But try telling that to the residents of Point Pleasant, where the Mothman isn't just a story, it's identity. Every year, thousands flock to their Mothman festival, snapping selfies with a 12-foot metallic statue downtown. The local newspaper even runs an annual Mothman Watch column because here's the twist, sightings never really stopped. As recently as 2017, a group of hikers captured shaky footage of something large and winged vanishing into the trees. What makes this myth endure isn't just the chills, it's the uncomfortable question humming beneath the surface. Why do humans keep seeing monsters before disasters? From ancient Rome's owl omens to modern reports of black dog apparitions before earthquakes, our brains seem wired to personify impending doom. The Mothman might be less about what's out there and more about what's inside us, a primal alarm system dressed in feathers and folklore. Point Pleasant knows this better than anyone. Their bridge is rebuilt now, their museum full of memorabilia, but on foggy nights near the river when the streetlights flicker, even the skeptics walk a little faster. Some legends don't need to be real to feel true. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where oxygen is scarce and shadows stretch unnaturally long, the Yeti isn't just a myth, it's a cultural fingerprint pressed into the ice. For centuries, Sherpa guides have spoken of the Migoi, a towering, ape-like creature that walks upright and leaves footprints too large to be human. These aren't campfire stories, they're woven into the spiritual fabric of the mountains, with Buddhist monasteries even claiming to preserve scalps and hand bones of the beast. But when Western explorers arrived in the 19th century, they didn't listen, they rebranded. The sacred Migoi became the abominable snowman, a sensational monster stalking the peaks, and the hunt for proof became less about understanding and more about conquest. The so-called evidence is a graveyard of hoaxes and hopeful misinterpretations. In 1921, British explorer Charles Howard Berry found strange footprints near the Lakpa La Pass, which his team attributed to a Metokangmi, Tibetan for man-bear snowman. A journalist mistranslated it as abominable, and the legend calcified. Then came the infamous 1951 Daily Mail expedition, where mountaineers returned with a scalp later revealed to be molded goat skin. The most damning blow, DNA testing in 2017 on 9 Yeti relics, fur, teeth, even a finger showed they belonged to bears, dogs, and in one case a human. Yet even science can't kill the myth, because the Yeti was never about bones, it was about borders. Climbers scaling Everest in the dead of night swear they've heard guttural howls echoing off the glaciers. Porters tell of vanished supplies and eerie silhouettes watching from ridgelines, but strip away the fear and you'll find something far more human, the need for the unknown to stay unknowable. The Himalayas are Earth's last uncharted wilderness, a place where altitude sickness warps perception and isolation breeds hallucination. When Sir Edmund Hillary summited Everest in 1953, he dismissed the Yeti as superstition, yet even he returned years later with a team to search for it. What's left is a paradox. The Yeti is simultaneously debunked and eternal, because the truth doesn't matter as much as the space it fills. For Sherpas, it's a guardian spirit, a warning against venturing too far into the sacred white silence. For outsiders, it's a blank screen to project their fantasies, whether as a missing link, a monster, or a metaphor for all we've yet to conquer. The mountains keep their secrets not by hiding them, but by letting us see exactly what we want to see. And somewhere in that blizzard of belief, the Migoi endures not as flesh and blood, but as the shadow we cast when we stare too long into the snow. The murky waters of Loch Ness hold more than just Scotland's deepest secrets. They cradle a legend that refuses to sink. For over 1,000 years, locals have whispered of a beast lurking beneath these peat-stained waves, but the modern myth of Nessie didn't truly surface until 1933. That's when a hotel manager named Aldi Mackay reported seeing an enormous creature churning the water like a rolling submarine. The newspaper headline called it a monster, and the frenzy began. Yet the roots of this tale run far deeper than a tabloid splash. Ancient Pictish carvings near the loch depict strange, flippant creatures, and St. Columba's 6th century biography describes him confronting a river beast that mauled a swimmer, an account suspiciously close to Ness's shores. But what transforms this from folklore into global obsession isn't the past. It's the tantalizing evidence that keeps bobbing to the surface. Sonar readings in the 1950s detected large, moving objects too substantial to be fish. Underwater photos in the 70s captured a flippant silhouette that resembled a plesios, or a marine reptile extinct for 65 million years. Then came the DNA survey of 2018, which analyzed hundreds of water samples. No prehistoric monsters were found, just an abundance of eel DNA. Skeptics cheered, but believers countered. What if Nessie is a giant, undiscovered eel? The loch's icy depths could hide specimens over 20 feet long, and eels are known to undulate in ways that mimic serpentine shapes. But science struggles against something stronger: human perception. On still mornings when mist clings to the water, even a log or a wave can twist into something monstrous under a hopeful gaze. Hoaxes have muddied the waters further. The most infamous, the surgeon's photo of 1934, was later confessed to be a toy submarine with a sculpted head. Yet the image remains iconic, proof of how badly we want the mystery to be real. Modern expeditions continue the hunt, armed with drones and thermal cameras, but Loch Ness guards its secrets well. The lake's sheer size, 23 miles long and nearly 800 feet deep, makes thorough searches nearly impossible. Sediment clouds visibility to inches, and underwater caves could theoretically hide creatures avoiding detection. Perhaps the real magic of Nessie isn't in proving its existence, but in recognizing what the myth gives us. The loch has become a pilgrimage site for wonder, a place where the ordinary world still holds room for the extraordinary. Every blurry photo, every sonar blip, is a reminder that we crave mysteries bigger than our smartphones can solve. In an age of satellites and algorithms, Loch Ness remains deliciously opaque, not because the truth isn't out there, but because we're not quite ready to stop looking. The first reports came from the mountains of Puerto Rico in 1995, not from folklore but from farmers. Dozens of goats and chickens were found drained of blood, their corpses punctured by 3 small holes in a perfect triangle. Witnesses described a creature standing 3 feet tall, with glowing red eyes, leathery gray skin, and spines running down its back. They called it El Chupacabra, the goat sucker. Within months, the terror spread like wildfire across Latin America, then leaped borders into the southern United States. But here's the twist: this wasn't some ancient legend. The Chupacabra was a modern myth born in an era of satellite TV and tabloid headlines, proving that fear needs no expiration date. Dig deeper, and the creature's roots tangle with older nightmares. Puerto Rico's folklore speaks of the Mocha vampire, a bat-like beast blamed for livestock deaths in the 1970s. Further back, the Aztecs feared the Cihuatateo, undead women who stole children's blood. Even Europe's vampire panics of the 1700s mirror the Chupacabra phenomenon, communities under stress, grasping for supernatural explanations. The difference: speed. Where rumors once took years to cross continents, late-night talk shows and chain emails turned the Chupacabra into a hemispheric boogeyman overnight. Science offers a less monstrous but equally fascinating explanation. Many Chupacabra carcasses turned out to be coyotes or dogs suffering from mange, a parasitic skin disease that strips fur, distorts features, and leaves animals gaunt and ghoulish. As for the blood-drained livestock, natural predation, animals like foxes and raccoons often target necks and underbellies, leaving clean wounds, but psychology plays the starring role. Once the Chupacabra entered pop culture, every odd animal death became evidence. A farmer in Texas might see a sick coyote and, primed by news reports, perceive a monster. Yet dismissing the Chupacabra as mere hysteria misses its cultural power. In Puerto Rico, the creature became a dark symbol of colonial anxiety, a manifestation of fears about outside exploitation. In Mexican border towns, it mirrored tensions over immigration. Even the creature's design evolved regionally, spiny-backed in the Caribbean, more canine in the U.S. Southwest. The Chupacabra wasn't just a beast, it was a Rorschach test, reflecting whatever a community feared most. Today, the myth persists, though the monsters keep changing. Thermal cameras capture blurry shapes in the desert. YouTube videos claim to show creatures too fast for the human eye. But the real legacy of the Chupacabra isn't in proving its existence, it's in revealing how easily the modern world can conjure new nightmares from old shadows. In an age of pandemics and climate crises, maybe we need our monsters to make sense of the chaos. And if history's any guide, they'll keep evolving right alongside us. The ocean's most legendary nightmare wasn't born from Hollywood. It erupted from the trembling hands of Norse sailors who swore they'd seen mountains rise from the waves. The Kraken, a beast so vast its bulk could be mistaken for an island, first slithered into written history in the 13th century, when Icelandic sagas warned of a creature that could drag entire ships into the abyss with arms thicker than castle towers. But strip away the medieval terror, and you'll find a collision between primal fear and cutting-edge science, because the Kraken might not be as mythical as we once thought. Start with the Vikings' descriptions. Their Kraken wasn't just a giant squid, it was an ecosystem. Sailors told of fish gathering in unnatural numbers above its submerged body, mistaking its back for shallow reefs until the island suddenly sank. Modern marine biologists recognize this behavior. Giant squids, while elusive, do indeed attract smaller fish with their bioluminescence, creating feeding frenzies visible from the surface. And those reefs, the largest known colossal squid can stretch over 40 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates, dimensions that would dwarf a Viking longship. Even more telling, 18th century Norwegian Bishop Erik Pontoppidan catalogued Kraken accounts, noting how its movements created whirlpools, a phenomenon now linked to deep-sea cephalopods expelling water in defensive bursts. Yet science alone can't explain the Kraken's grip on our imagination. That's where cinema takes over, from Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to the tentacled horror of 1981, Clash of the Titans. The Kraken became shorthand for nature's untamable wrath. Pirates of the Caribbean turned it into a clockwork monster, obedient to Davy Jones' will, a far cry from the Norse original, which answered to no one. But perhaps the most fascinating twist is how reality caught up to fiction. In 2004, Japanese researchers captured the first live images of a giant squid in its natural habitat, revealing a creature every bit as alien and terrifying as the legends suggested. Its 8 arms were lined with serrated suckers, its movements eerily silent in the crushing blackness of the deep. What makes the Kraken myth endure isn't just the thrill of the hunt, it's the ocean's refusal to be fully known. Even today, less than 5% of the seafloor has been mapped in detail. We've sent probes to Mars but still can't predict when or where the next giant squid might surface. The Kraken lives in that uncharted space between our curiosity and our fear, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, just respected. And when storm clouds gather on the horizon, it's hard not to wonder if the old sailors were right all along. Maybe the ocean isn't just hiding creatures. Maybe it's waiting. Deep beneath Crete's sun-baked earth, the ruins of Knossos whisper secrets older than Theseus' sword. The myth of the Minotaur, a monstrous half-man, half-bull trapped in a labyrinth, feels like pure fantasy. But wander the palace's crumbling corridors and something unsettling emerges. The myth might be a distorted memory of a very real terror. The sprawling complex, with its 300 rooms and twisting passageways, matches ancient descriptions of the labyrinth so precisely, early archaeologists half expected to find bones in its depths. But the truth lurking here isn't a monster. It's a revelation about how power, fear, and architecture can twist history into myth. The bull's shadow looms large in Minoan culture. Frescoes at Knossos depict acrobats vaulting over charging bulls in a sacred ritual, their lives balanced on the edge of horns. Clay tablets bear a script called Linear B, where symbols of bulls appear alongside words for sacrifice. Even the palace's layout, a maze-like structure designed to confuse outsiders, echoes the labyrinth's purpose, to contain something dangerous. Scholars now suggest the Minotaur myth could be a garbled retelling of Minoan bull worship, filtered through the lens of their enemies. When Mycenaean Greeks conquered Crete around 1400 BCE, they might have demonized the island's sacred rituals, transforming a revered symbol into a flesh-eating horror. Theseus' victory takes on new meaning in this light. The legendary hero who slays the Minotaur and escapes the labyrinth by following Ariadne's thread isn't just a monster slayer. He's a metaphor for Mycenae's political takeover. The thread could represent insider knowledge from Cretan allies, guiding invaders through the palace's defensive chaos. Even the Minotaur's name, Asterion, appears in Linear B as a title for Minoan rulers. Was the monster actually a defeated king, his legacy rewritten by victors? The ruins hold no clear answer, but the stones seem to murmur that history belongs to those who control the story. Modern excavations add another twist. Beneath Knossos' floors, archaeologists found chambers filled with bull bones, not human remains, but evidence of mass sacrifices. Some skeletons show cut marks consistent with ritual feasting, suggesting bulls were central to Minoan identity. For a seafaring empire, the bull's brute strength might have symbolized mastery over nature's chaos. Later Greeks, unfamiliar with these practices, could have interpreted them as monstrous, spinning tales of a beast demanding human tribute. Even the labyrinth's design finds parallels in nature. The spiral patterns of nautilus shells, sacred to the Minoans, mirror the palace's coiled walkways. The Minotaur endures because it taps into something primal, the fear of being lost, consumed, or trapped by forces beyond our control. Today, psychologists use labyrinth as shorthand for life's complex choices, while artists reimagine the Minotaur as a tragic figure, a victim of its own nature. Knossos reminds us that every monster begins as a misunderstood truth, its roars growing louder with each retelling. The real horror isn't what waits in the dark, it's how easily we reshape the past to fit the monsters we need. And in that crumbling palace, the line between history and nightmare blurs like footprints in dust. The Amazons weren't just warriors, they were rebels. Greek myths painted them as man-hating barbarians, cutting off their right breasts to draw bows more easily, but archaeology tells a different story. In the vast steppes of Eurasia, from the Black Sea to Mongolia, graves of Scythian women buried with weapons have shattered the myth's foundations. These weren't figments of imagination. They were flesh and blood horse archers, their skeletons bearing battle scars and their tombs filled with swords, daggers, and quivers of arrows. One grave in particular, discovered in 1993 in modern-day Kazakhstan, held a woman's skeleton with a dagger still clutched in her hand and an arrowhead lodged in her skull, proof she died fighting. The Greeks didn't invent the Amazons, they exaggerated them. So where did the myth go wrong? Start with the name. Historians believe Amazon might come from the Iranian word Hamazon, meaning warriors. Greek travelers encountering Scythian women who rode, hunted, and fought alongside men could have spun these egalitarian societies into cautionary tales for their own women, confined to domestic roles. Even Herodotus, often called the father of history, wrote that Amazons mated with Scythian men to create a new race of warriors. But dig deeper, and his account reveals something radical. These women refused to adopt Scythian customs, insisting on keeping their independence. That rebellious spirit echoes in modern DNA studies, which show Scythian women shared genetic markers with men, suggesting they traveled vast distances just like their male counterparts. The breast-cutting legend crumbles under scrutiny. Not a single Scythian female skeleton shows signs of mastectomy, and ancient artwork depicts Amazons with both breasts intact, drawing bows effortlessly. The myth likely sprang from Greek confusion over asymmetrical armor or the sight of women binding one breast for better bow control, a practical choice twisted into something grotesque by outsiders. Even their supposed man-hating nature doesn't hold up. Scythian burial sites show men and women buried together as equals, their grave goods equally rich. The real Amazons weren't isolated man-killers, they were part of complex nomadic societies where skill, not gender, dictated your role. Fast forward to today, and the Amazon myth has morphed again, this time into a symbol of female empowerment. Wonder Woman's origins in World War II comics drew directly from these ancient tales, her creator inspired by early feminist movements. Modern reenactors in Russia and Central Asia now revive Scythian archery techniques, proving the impossible feats attributed to Amazons were entirely within reach. Yet the most compelling legacy might be in the dirt itself. Recent excavations keep unearthing more warrior women, from the Siberian Princess of Yukok with her intricate tattoos to a 4th century BCE grave in Armenia where a woman was buried with a sword and a cosmetics box. The Amazons remind us that history is written by those who tell the stories, but not all stories stay buried. For every Greek vase painting of Amazons being slain, there's a skeleton with a bowed spine from years on horseback, a quiver still full of arrows. The truth wasn't myth, it was simply waiting for us to dig deeper. The Holy Grail isn't just a cup, it's a Rorschach test for the soul. Depending on who you ask, it's the chalice that caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion, a Celtic cauldron of immortality, or even a coded metaphor for lost divine knowledge. The earliest Grail stories didn't focus on relics at all. In 12th century romances like Création de Troyes' Percival, the Grail was a mystical platter bearing a single communion wafer, capable of sustaining life itself. But when medieval writers fused these tales with Arthurian legends, the object transformed, absorbing Christian symbolism and political intrigue until it became the most coveted treasure in Western myth. Enter the Knights Templar, this monastic order's sudden rise and brutal downfall in the 14th century birthed conspiracy theories that still echo today. Rumors swirled that the Templars had discovered the Grail beneath Solomon's temple during the Crusades, hiding it from a corrupt church. When King Philip IV of France burned the order's leaders at the stake in 1307, their last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, allegedly cursed the king and the Pope from the flames, a dramatic finale that fueled speculation the Grail had been smuggled away. Modern theorists point to Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, its pillars carved with maize plants unknown in Europe when it was built, as evidence of Templar secrets reaching the New World. But the truth is murkier. The Templars' own records mention no Grail, and the earliest links between them and the chalice appeared centuries after their dissolution, in Victorian-era occult revivals. The Grail's duality, holy relic vs. esoteric symbol, reaches its peak in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival. Here, the Grail isn't gold or silver, but a floating stone called the Lapsit Exilis, capable of granting eternal youth. Alchemists later interpreted this as the Philosopher's Stone, while feminists reclaimed the legend through the sangreal pun, reinterpreting it as sangreal, royal blood, a metaphor for Mary Magdalene's womb carrying Christ's lineage. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code popularized this angle, but its roots stretch back to medieval heresies that venerated Magdalene as Christ's equal. Today, the search continues, not in dank crypts but in DNA labs and digitized manuscripts. Scientists analyzed the Valencia chalice, long touted as the Grail, revealing it's a 1st century Palestinian stone cup, while historians dissect Grail romances for hidden feminist or queer subtext. Yet the Grail's power lies precisely in its elusiveness. It mirrors whatever a culture desires most: divine favor for medieval peasants, lost knowledge for Renaissance scholars, or even alien technology for modern conspiracy theorists. The real magic isn't in finding the Grail. It's in the stories we tell while searching, and perhaps that was the point all along. The Philosopher's Stone wasn't just about turning lead into gold, it was about turning time itself into a servant rather than a master. Buried in the cryptic texts of medieval alchemists, this legendary substance promised eternal youth, unlimited wealth, and the secrets of creation. But strip away the mysticism, and you'll find a quest that bridged science and spirituality, driving some of history's brightest minds to the edge of madness. Isaac Newton, the father of calculus and gravity, spent more time scribbling alchemical formulas than equations, convinced the stone held the key to unlocking God's blueprint for the universe. His private manuscripts reveal a man obsessed, decoding ancient recipes with the same precision he applied to planetary motion. Alchemy's roots run deeper than most realize. In ancient Alexandria, scholars like Zosimos of Panopolis wrote of a divine water that could purify metals, an early hint at the stone's transformative powers. By the Middle Ages, the myth had crystallized into a step-by-step process. Take base matter, purify it through fermentation and distillation, and imbue it with a red tincture that could heal sickness and bestow immortality. Arab alchemists called it al-iksir, the origin of our word elixir, while Chinese Taoists sought a similar substance, jindan, through mercury and cinnabar experiments. The parallels are striking, cultures separated by continents chasing the same impossible dream. Then came the Renaissance, when alchemy wasn't fringe science but cutting-edge research. Kings hired alchemists to fill their coffers, and figures like Paracelsus used the stone's principles to pioneer early chemistry and medicine. But the real twist: they weren't entirely wrong. Modern nuclear physics can transmute elements. Particle accelerators turn mercury into gold every day, albeit at astronomical cost. The alchemists' fatal flaw wasn't their goal, but their tools. Without atomic theory, they groped in the dark, interpreting chemical reactions as mystical signs. Jump to the 20th century, and the stone sheds its scientific skin to become pop culture's favorite MacGuffin. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter reimagined it as a blood-red elixir hidden behind enchanted mirrors, weaving medieval lore into a modern parable about the dangers of chasing immortality. Yet the stone's allure persists not in labs, but in Silicon Valley, where tech billionaires pour millions into anti-aging startups seeking their own digital elixirs. The language has changed, but the obsession hasn't. We're still chasing the same myth, just with CRISPR instead of crucibles. The Philosopher's Stone endures because it's not really about chemistry. It's about the human refusal to accept limits on life, on knowledge, on power. Every culture has its version, from the Hindu Soma to the Greek Ambrosia, because the dream isn't just universal. It's eternal, and perhaps that's the real secret the alchemists missed. The stone was never something you could hold. it was the quest itself, the fire that keeps us searching, even when the answers dissolve like smoke. The Tower of Babel isn't just a story, it's a warning etched into the foundations of civilization itself. Genesis tells of a united humanity speaking one language, building a city with a tower so high it would reach the heavens. But their ambition angered God, who scattered them across the earth and confounded their speech, creating the world's many tongues. On the surface, it's a tale about divine punishment, but dig deeper, and you'll uncover layers of historical anxiety, linguistic mystery, and a cautionary fable that feels eerily relevant in our age of glass and steel megastructures. Archaeologists have long searched for the real-world inspiration behind the myth. The most compelling candidate, the Etemenanke ziggurat in Babylon, a massive step temple dedicated to the god Marduk. Descriptions from ancient texts match the biblical account: towering tiers of baked brick, a staircase spiraling toward the sky, and a summit painted in lapis lazuli to mimic the heavens. When Nebuchadnezzar II rebuilt it in the 6th century BCE, he boasted of making it touch the sky. But here's the twist: the ziggurat wasn't just a monument, it was a bridge between worlds. Babylonians believed gods descended to earth via these structures, and human priests climbed them to commune with the divine. The sin of Babel wasn't height, it was hubris. A people trying to storm heaven on their own terms. Linguists see something different in the story, a primal explanation for humanity's dizzying diversity of languages. Before modern science, how else could cultures explain why a neighbor's speech sounded like gibberish? The myth reflects a very real phenomenon, the way languages fracture and evolve over time. Take the Indo-European language family, which sprawls from English to Sanskrit. Linguists can trace these tongues back to a common ancestor spoken over 5,000 years ago. But unlike Babel's sudden schism, language drift happens gradually, like a wall crumbling brick by brick. Still, the metaphor holds: communication barriers can topple empires as surely as any divine intervention. Modern skyscrapers resurrect Babel's ambition with every new spire. The Burj Khalifa, twice the height of the Empire State Building, mirrors humanity's timeless urge to pierce the clouds. Yet these structures come with their own divine punishments. Super tall buildings create wind tunnels strong enough to knock pedestrians off their feet. Their shadows stretch for miles, altering microclimates and plunging streets into perpetual twilight. Even their construction relies on a modern Babel, thousands of workers from dozens of countries, speaking a patchwork of languages, united only by blueprints and steel beams. The difference today: we call this progress, not sacrilege. Perhaps the real lesson of Babel isn't about language or architecture, but about the tension between unity and diversity. The biblical story mourns a lost harmony while celebrating the richness of scattered cultures. In an era where AI translation promises to erase language barriers once more, we're left wondering, was Babel's curse actually a blessing in disguise? Without it, we might never have had the poetry of Rumi, the novels of Dostoevsky, or the songs of Fela Kuti. The tower fell, but in its rubble something beautiful grew. And that's a paradox worth remembering every time we gaze up at a gleaming new monolith scraping the sky. The legend of the wandering Jew begins not in scripture, but in the poisoned soil of medieval Europe. In 1337, a Parisian chronicler recorded a bizarre tale. A shoemaker in Armenia claimed to have struck Jesus on his way to crucifixion, earning him a curse to walk the earth until the second coming. By the 1400s, this figure had morphed into a spectral warning for Christians, forever pacing the globe as proof of divine judgment. But beneath this supernatural veneer lies a darker truth: this myth wasn't just about punishment. It was a mirror reflecting Europe's growing anti-Semitism, transforming Jewish people into perpetual outsiders condemned by their very existence. Literature amplified the stereotype. Goethe, Shelley, and Eugene Sue all reimagined the wandering Jew as a tragic immortal. but their portrayals dripped with contradiction, simultaneously pitied and feared, ancient yet powerless. In Matthew Lewis's Gothic novel The Monk, the Jew becomes a villainous sorcerer, while 19th century penny dreadfuls depicted him as a hook-nosed miser hoarding cursed gold. These tropes didn't emerge from nowhere. They echoed real-world persecutions, the blood libels of England, the pogroms of Spain, where Jewish communities were scapegoated for plagues, famines, and financial crises. The wandering curse became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Excluded from land ownership and guilds, many Jewish people did travel endlessly as merchants and moneylenders, their mobility twisted into proof of their unnatural nature. Yet the myth took unexpected turns in Jewish folklore itself. The eternal Jew of Yiddish tales, often called Ahasuerus, wasn't just a sufferer, he was a witness. In some stories, he appears at historical tragedies, from the destruction of the temple to the Black Death, silently observing humanity's cruelty. This version reclaimed the narrative, transforming the wanderer from a Christian cautionary tale into a symbol of resilience. Even more striking parallels exist worldwide. Islam's Qidr, an immortal guide, shares the Jew's agelessness but as a spiritual teacher. Buddhist Jataka tales speak of monks who outlive centuries to teach enlightenment. The difference: these figures aren't cursed, they're chosen. Modern revisions strip the legend of its anti-Semitic roots. Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics reimagined the wandering Jew as a man who regrets his cruelty and seeks redemption. Jorge Luis Borges wrote him as a metaphor for history's cyclical violence. But the most poignant twist came in 2022, when archaeologists in Vienna found a 15th century graffito depicting the wandering Jew not as a villain, but as a weary traveler resting under a tree. This crude sketch suggests some medieval Europeans saw him not as a monster, but as a human. And that's the real tragedy of the myth, not the curse of endless walking, but our refusal to let him stop. The streets of Hamelin were too quiet on that summer day in 1284. No laughter, no footsteps, just the hollow echo of a pipe's melody fading into the hills. The legend of the Pied Piper is often told as a whimsical fairy tale, but its roots are far darker. According to town records, 130 children vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that's haunted historians for centuries. The piper, dressed in multicolored cloth, was said to have lured them away after the town refused to pay him for ridding them of a rat infestation. But buried beneath this fable lies a chilling question. Was the piper just a metaphor, or could a real event have inspired such a lasting nightmare? One theory points to mass hysteria. Medieval Europe was no stranger to collective delusions, dancing plagues, werewolf panics, even children's crusades where thousands marched to their doom. Some suggest the piper was a charismatic recruiter, leading Hamelin's youth to join a doomed migration eastward, possibly to colonize Eastern Europe. Town ledgers from the era note a sudden loss of young citizens, and linguistic traces in Transylvania even hint at settlers from Lower Saxony. But migration doesn't explain the rats, and that's where pathology enters the picture. The Black Death wouldn't strike for decades, but rat-borne diseases like typhus or ergot poisoning, a fungal infection causing hallucinations, could have sparked both the infestation and the town's desperate bargain with a stranger. Then there's the moral spine of the story. The Grimm brothers, who popularized the tale in the 1800s, framed it as a warning against broken promises. But earlier versions, like the Lüneburg Manuscript from 1450, hint at something more sinister. Here, the piper isn't just a jilted contractor, he's death himself, collecting souls as payment. This version aligns with medieval art depicting the plague as a skeletal musician leading dancing victims to their graves. The rats, then, might symbolize corruption, and the children, innocents sacrificed by a town that valued gold over honor. Modern Hamelin still feels the weight of the legend. Every Sunday, a glockenspiel in the town square reenacts the piper's tune, while street plaques mark where the children were last seen. Yet the most haunting relic is the so-called silent street, where music and dancing are banned out of respect for the lost. Whether the piper was a man, a metaphor, or something more supernatural, the story endures because it taps into our deepest fears, the consequences of greed, the fragility of trust, and the terrible price of ignoring what's owed, not just to strangers but to our own. There's a reason ghost ships haunt every culture that's ever sailed. Phantom vessels glide through Norse sagas, Chinese folklore, and Caribbean pirate tales alike. But none chill the blood quite like the Flying Dutchman, a spectral galleon doomed to roam the seas forever, its tattered sails glowing with an eerie light. The legend first slithered into print in the late 1700s, when British sailors whispered of spotting a phantom ship off the Cape of Good Hope, its crew skeletal and its hull rotting yet racing against the wind. By 1843, Wagner's opera catapulted the Dutchman into high art, painting its captain as a tragic figure cursed for blasphemy, swearing he'd round the stormy cape even if it took eternity. But peel back the layers of this myth, and you'll find a cocktail of maritime dread, meteorological mischief, and a very real shipwreck that might have birthed the nightmare. Start with the science. The Cape of Good Hope isn't just a poetic name, it's a graveyard of ships where the Atlantic and Indian Oceans collide in waves that can tower over 100 feet. Here, a phenomenon called Fata Morgana bends light like a funhouse mirror, distorting distant vessels into floating apparitions. Combine that with St. Elmo's fire, electrical plasma that makes masts glow blue, and you've got the perfect recipe for a ghost ship sighting. Yet the Dutchman's persistence suggests something deeper. Sailors' logs from the Dutch East India Company reveal a disturbing pattern, crews reporting a phantom ship before disasters, as if it were an omen. In 1881, a British admiral even logged an encounter, describing a red-lit brigantine that vanished moments before his own ship nearly capsized in a freak squall. The opera's influence can't be overstated. Wagner's Der Fliegende Holländer transformed the captain from a faceless spectre into a romantic antihero, his curse lifting only if he finds true love. This twist resonated with Victorian audiences obsessed with redemption arcs, but it also sanitized the horror. Original Dutch versions paint a far grimmer fate. The captain gambles his soul in a dice game with the devil, losing not just his life but his very identity. His ship becomes a floating purgatory, collecting doomed sailors like a nautical charon. Modern pop culture runs with this duality. Pirates of the Caribbean turned the Dutchman into Davy Jones' rotting flagship, while SpongeBob parodied it as a burger-loving ghost. Yet the eeriest adaptation might be real life. During World War II, Allied bomber crews reported a phantom plane trailing their formations over the North Sea, nicknamed the Dutchman in grim homage. Perhaps the most compelling theory ties the legend to a real maritime tragedy. In 1641, the Dutch merchant ship Batavia wrecked off Australia, leading to mutiny, murder, and cannibalism among survivors. Records suggest one officer, condemned for his crimes, was set adrift in a tiny boat, a detail mirroring early Dutchman tales of a cursed sailor forever sailing alone. Whether fact or fiction, the myth endures because it taps into our primal fear of being unmoored, adrift in a world that no longer recognizes us. The Dutchman isn't just a ghost story, it's a warning etched in salt and storm. Some debts can't be repaid, and some voyages never end. The first thing you need to understand about the Headless Horseman is that he wasn't born in Sleepy Hollow, he was borrowed. Washington Irving's 1820 tale, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, immortalized the specter, but its roots stretch back centuries to Celtic battlefields where the Dullahan, a headless fey rider, carried his own severed head like a lantern. Unlike Irving's Hessian mercenary, this Irish omen of death didn't chase victims for sport. He simply stopped at a home, called the inhabitant's name, and sealed their fate. The moment that name left his lips, the person's soul would vanish into the night. Irving took this ancient terror, dressed it in Revolutionary War garb, and unleashed it on the Hudson Valley, creating something far more American and far more entrepreneurial. Sleepy Hollow today is a masterclass in myth monetization. What was once a quiet Dutch settlement now thrives on Halloween tourism, with haunted hayrides, decapitated mannequins, and a bridge where visitors reenact Ichabod Crane's fateful flight. The irony, Irving's original story never confirms the horseman was supernatural, just a clever prank by Brombones to scare off his romantic rival. But that ambiguity is precisely what fuels the legend. People want to believe in the horseman because a prankster in a costume doesn't sell tickets or t-shirts. The town leans hard into the myth, even rebranding its high school sports teams as the Horsemen, turning a symbol of terror into a mascot. Yet the Dullahan's influence lingers in subtle ways. Modern horror films like The Hallow and Darby O'Gill and The Little People reintroduced the original myth to audiences, showcasing the horseman's true, unnerving origins. Unlike Irving's version, the Dullahan doesn't need a pumpkin. His detached head's grin is horrifying enough, with eyes that dart like trapped flies and skin that glows like spoiled milk. He doesn't ride a horse but a black steed whose galloping hooves spark flames, and where he stops, someone will die. No pranks, no escape, just inevitability. This duality, entrepreneurial spectacle versus primal dread, reveals how legends evolved to suit their audience. The Dullahan reflects an older world's harshness, where death came without warning or reason. Irving's horseman, meanwhile, mirrors early America's anxieties. War veterans left adrift, strangers in the woods, and the fear that the past's violence might not stay buried. Today's Sleepy Hollow blends both, selling thrills while quietly reminding us that some stories can't be outrun, no matter how fast you ride. The horseman may be fiction, but the fear he rides on, that's as real as the ground beneath your feet. Deep in the shadowy pines of southern New Jersey, where the trees twist into grotesque shapes and the bogs whisper with unseen things, a legend was born not from ancient scrolls, but from a mother's curse. The Jersey Devil isn't some vague specter. It's a visceral nightmare with cloven hooves, leathery wings, and a scream like a woman being murdered. The story goes that in 1735, a frustrated Leeds woman, some say a witch, others just a woman tired of 12 children, shouted to the heavens that her next child would be the devil himself. When the baby arrived, it transformed before her eyes, bursting through the chimney into the night. But this wasn't just a spooky bedtime story. It became a full-blown panic that would grip an entire region centuries later. The Pine Barrens themselves are a character in this myth, a million acres of stunted oaks and acidic rivers, where the soil is so poor colonial farmers called it barren. This isolation bred superstition. Lenape tribes spoke of the Mhengwi, a shape-shifting spirit, while Swedish settlers told of kraken, goat-legged tricksters. By the 1800s, sightings exploded, a winged beast slaughtering livestock, leaving tracks that vanished mid-stride. The hysteria peaked in 1909, when thousands reported the devil swooping over Philadelphia, attacking trolley cars and leaving hoof prints on rooftops. Newspapers ran breathless accounts, schools closed, and vigilantes armed with shotguns patrolled the woods. The sheer volume of witnesses, policemen, politicians, even a future admiral, forced the Smithsonian to investigate. Their conclusion, mass hysteria fueled by the eerie landscape and a collective hunger for the supernatural. Then came the twist no one saw coming: sports marketing. In 1982, the NHL's New Jersey Devils needed a mascot, and what better than the state's most infamous resident? The team's crimson, pitchfork-wielding logo sanitized the creature into a cartoon, but die-hard fans know the lore runs deeper. During the 1995 playoffs, players claimed to see a shadowy figure in the arena rafters right before they clinched the Stanley Cup. Coincidence? Maybe, but in a state where diners serve devil dogs and road signs warn "Caution, Jersey Devil Crossing," the line between joke and belief is as thin as Pine Barrens fog. What makes this myth endure isn't just the chills, it's the way it mirrors our own fears. The devil's descriptions evolved with the times, horse-like in agrarian eras, bat-winged during the dawn of aviation, even UFO adjacent in the 50s. It's a Rorschach blot for anxiety, from colonial religious guilt to modern environmental dread. Scientists might blame misidentified sandhill cranes or elaborate hoaxes, but step into those pines at dusk when the wind sounds like ragged breathing, and you'll understand why some legends refuse to die. The Jersey Devil isn't just a monster, it's the sound your mind makes when the woods go quiet. There's a reason Australia's riverbanks go silent when the sun dips below the gum trees, something ancient watches from the water's edge. The Bunyip, a shape-shifting spirit from Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, isn't just another monster tale. It's a living lesson carved into the land itself. To the Wemba Wemba people, it's Kainprati, a guardian with the face of a starved dog and the tail of a whale. The Ungarangeri know it as Muliawonk, a creature whose bellowing cries warn of coming floods. But when European settlers arrived, they didn't listen. They twisted the Bunyip into something far more sinister, revealing how fear distorts what we don't understand. Early colonists, already unnerved by Australia's alien landscape, latched onto Aboriginal accounts of the Bunyip like lifelines. Newspaper sketches from the 1800s depict a grotesque hybrid part crocodile, part emu, with glowing eyes and a kangaroo's pouch. Scientists, desperate to categorize it, blamed escaped convicts or surviving megafauna like Diprotodon, a prehistoric wombat the size of a rhino, but the Bunyip refused to be pinned down. Settlers' diaries tell of missing livestock, of children vanishing near billabongs, their last screams swallowed by the water. The myth became a colonial weapon, used to justify draining wetlands and displacing Aboriginal communities from sacred sites. What was once a spiritual marker, a reminder to respect the water's power, became a boogeyman to fuel conquest. Yet the Bunyip's true power lies in its ecological prophecy. Aboriginal stories often describe it as both creator and destroyer, its moods dictating the health of rivers and marshes. In the Murray-Darling Basin, where over-irrigation has turned once thriving wetlands to dust, elders warn that the Bunyip's absence isn't a relief, it's a death knell. When the water dies, so does its spirit. Modern biologists echo this wisdom, noting how the Bunyip's described habitats overlap with critical ecosystems now collapsing under drought. The creature's eerie cries, often compared to a bullroarer's drone, mirror the sounds of dying frogs, a species now vanishing worldwide. Today, the Bunyip straddles two worlds. Tourist shops sell plush toys with googly eyes, while Aboriginal artists paint it as it was always meant to be seen, not a monster but a mirror. When uranium mining threatened the sacred springs of the Northern Territory in 2019, activists invoked the Bunyip as a symbol of resistance, its resurgence in local art a warning against ecological hubris. Even Australia's national cinema has reclaimed the myth. Films like The Babadook reimagined it as a metaphor for grief, while Cleverman wove it into a dystopian allegory of climate collapse. The Bunyip endures because it was never just a story. It's a pact between people and place, written in mud and moonlight. To hear its call isn't to fear the water, but to remember what happens when we stop listening to the land. And in a world burning and drying by turns, that lesson howls louder than ever. The wind howls differently in the North Woods, not like a storm, but like something hungry. Among the Algonquian peoples, from the Great Lakes to the frozen Canadian tundra, that sound has a name: Wendigo. This isn't just a monster. It's the embodiment of winter's cruelty, a gaunt giant with ice for blood and lips blackened from chewing on tree bark when human flesh runs scarce. But the most terrifying thing about the Wendigo isn't its antlers or its heart of frozen glass, it's how easily a person can become one. Dig into the oldest Ojibwe and Cree stories and you'll find a chilling pattern. The Wendigo isn't born, it's made. When starvation claws at the belly, when the last pemmican is gone and the snowdrifts swallow the trails, that's when the transformation begins. A hunter who resorts to cannibalism to survive doesn't just break a taboo, they unmake themselves. Their body stretches, their fingers lengthen into claws, and their hunger grows until it can never be filled. These tales weren't just campfire warnings, they were survival manuals. In a land where winter could erase entire communities, the Wendigo myth enforced sharing, restraint, and respect for the thin line between humanity and desperation. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the Wendigo takes on a new horror: psychology. Colonial doctors working in Algonquian communities began documenting cases of Wendigo psychosis, a condition where sufferers believed they were turning into the creature, begging to be killed before they hurt others. Some historians argue these were misdiagnoses of schizophrenia or vitamin B deficiencies, but others see something darker: the trauma of forced displacement and famine inflicted on indigenous peoples. When the Canadian government seized ancestral hunting grounds, pushing communities to the brink of starvation, the Wendigo ceased to be just a legend. It became a mirror. Then Hollywood got its claws in the myth. By the mid-20th century, the Wendigo shed its cultural roots, morphing into a generic boogeyman in pulp comics and B-movies. Films like Ravenous 1999 turned it into a metaphor for Manifest Destiny's insatiable greed, while Antlers 2021 reduced it to a jump scare factory. The irony: these adaptations often strip away the very thing that makes the Wendigo terrifying, not its fangs, but its origin. A monster that's chosen is far scarier than one that's born. Yet the Wendigo's true power lies in its flexibility. Environmentalists now invoke it as a symbol of unchecked consumption, our world eaten alive by a hunger that can't be satisfied. Anishinaabe writers like Louise Erdrich reclaim it in novels like The Round House, where it embodies the cyclical violence of colonialism. And in remote northern communities, elders still whisper warnings when the wind howls too long: don't go out alone. Don't listen to the voice that says you're still human. The Wendigo isn't just a story, it's a question. How much hunger does it take to forget who we are? And in the end, which is worse, the monster outside or the one we might become? When thunder cracks across the Great Plains, the Lakota say it's not just weather, it's the beating wings of the Thunderbird. This colossal spirit doesn't merely bring storms, it is the storm, with feathers dark as rolling thunderclouds and lightning flashing from its eyes. Among Pacific Northwest tribes, totem poles carve its likeness, towering above wolves and bears, a symbol of raw power and protection. But what's astonishing isn't just the myth's persistence, it's how modern paleontologists and cryptozoologists have tried to graft science onto this sacred symbol, suggesting the Thunderbird might be a folk memory of Quetzalcoatlus, a pterosaur with a 40-foot wingspan that vanished 65 million years ago. The intersection of tradition and speculation becomes even richer when you examine the details. To the Kwakwaka'wakwa people, the Thunderbird isn't a mindless force, it's a divine mediator, snatching whales from the ocean to feed villages during famines. Its battles with serpentine underwater spirits like the Hades Wasco explain tidal waves and earthquakes. Contrast this with 19th century frontier newspapers brimming with reports of giant flying lizards spotted by settlers. In 1890, the Tombstone epitaph even claimed 2 cowboys shot a Thunderbird-like creature, its carcass stretched between barn walls like a grotesque banner. No physical evidence survived, but the story crystallized a pattern: indigenous reverence meeting colonial fascination, each lens distorting the other. Totem poles offer another layer to unravel. Thunderbirds atop these carvings aren't arbitrary, they're heraldic crests declaring a family's lineage and spiritual alliances. The beak's curve, the placement of lightning motifs, even the direction the bird faces all hold coded meaning. Museum collections now grapple with this complexity. A Tlingit totem pole in Seattle's Burke Museum shows the Thunderbird clutching a killer whale, a tableau that tourists might snap photos of without realizing it's not just art, it's a legal document of sorts encoding ancestral rights to fishing grounds. This duality, sacred symbol to some, curious artifact to others, fuels modern debates about cultural appropriation versus appreciation. Cryptid hunters, meanwhile, scour the southwest for thunderbird nests, pointing to unusual tree formations and giant feathers allegedly found in Texas caves. Skeptics counter that California condors, with their 10-foot wingspans, could explain many sightings, especially when glimpsed through storm haze. Yet the most compelling evidence might be psychological. Humans are wired to see patterns. Our brains reflexively connect lightning to a striking beak, thunder to flapping wings. It's no accident that cultures worldwide, from Zimbabwe's Endebil to Scandinavia's Thor, personify storms as winged beings. The thunderbird endures because it answers a primal need, to give chaos a shape, to make the uncontrollable feel like something you can bargain with. What's often overlooked is how the myth adapts. In contemporary Navajo sand paintings, the thunderbird's wings now frame solar panels, a nod to harvesting energy as earlier generations harvested rain. Alaskan villages facing climate change weave the creature into warnings about erratic weather, its flights growing more angered as glaciers vanish. The thunderbird isn't frozen in folklore, it evolves just as the storms it rides, and that's the real magic. Whether viewed through the lens of spirituality, speculative biology, or social commentary, this legend refuses to be caged. It soars across time, reminding us that some stories don't just explain the world, they change with it. The ocean doesn't just hide seals off Scotland's rocky coasts, it guards a secret older than the cliffs themselves. Selkie legends whisper of shapeshifters, creatures who slip off their sealskins to dance as humans under the moonlight, only to vanish back into the waves at dawn. But peel back the romantic veneer of these stories and you'll find something far more haunting, tales not of love but of theft. In the most traditional versions, a man steals a Selkie's skin to force her into marriage, trapping her on land until she finds her hidden pelt and escapes. This isn't a whimsical fairy tale, it's a stark metaphor for autonomy wrapped in the salty air of the North Atlantic. What makes Selkie stories uniquely powerful is their duality. To coastal communities, they served as both warning and wish fulfillment. Fishermen spoke of Selkies as omens, spotting one meant storms or bounty, depending on the teller. But for women in rigid, patriarchal societies, these myths offered a different kind of solace. The Selkie's ability to shed her human skin and return to the sea mirrored desires for freedom from arranged marriages or domestic drudgery. Irish variants even depict Selkie women as skilled healers, their knowledge tied to the tides, suggesting a deep connection between feminine wisdom and the untamable ocean. Modern retellings amplify these themes with striking creativity. In the film The Secret of Roninish, the Selkie isn't a captive but a guardian, ensuring the survival of a family bound to the sea. Author Jane Yolen's Grayling reimagines the myth through a transgender lens, where the Selkie's transformation becomes a metaphor for self-discovery. Even pop music leans into the lore. Florence Plus the Machine's Howl paints the Selkie as a wild force resisting containment, howling, "I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm something you'll never understand." Yet the most radical interpretations come from contemporary feminist scholars. They frame the stolen sealskin as symbolic of bodily agency, with the Selkie's escape representing reclaiming power. Orkney poet Jen Hadfield writes of Selkies knitting their own skins back together, a defiant act of self-repair. This shift from tragic victim to resilient survivor reflects how myths evolved to voice modern struggles. The Selkie isn't just a relic of folklore, she's a shapeshifter herself, adapting to each generation's tides. Archaeology adds an eerie footnote to the legend. On Orkney's beaches, researchers found piles of seal bones arranged in ritual patterns, some dating back to the Iron Age, alongside carvings of human-animal hybrids. These finds suggest Selkie tales might spring from ancient shamanic traditions where wearing sealskins allowed spiritual passage between worlds. The line between myth and memory blurs here like footprints washed away by the rising tide. The Selkie's enduring magic lies in her refusal to be pinned down. She's a warning against possession, a celebration of wildness, and a mirror for anyone who's ever felt trapped. Whether she's weeping on the shore or laughing in the waves, her story always ends the same way. The call of the sea is stronger than any cage, and in that there's a truth as deep as the ocean floor. Some freedoms can't be stolen, only borrowed. The first travelers to vanish into the bog probably thought they'd found salvation, a flickering light bobbing just beyond the reeds, guiding them towards solid ground. Instead, they stumbled into waterlogged graves, their last breaths choked by peat as the light danced mockingly away. The wisps have haunted wetlands for centuries, known by as many names as there are cultures that fear them. Ignis Fatuus, foolish fire to medieval scholars, hinkapunks in British folklore, Alaya ghosts to Bengali fishermen. But what makes these phantom flames so chilling isn't their glow. It's the eerie intelligence behind their movements, as if something alive is pulling the strings. Science offers a gaslit explanation literally. Decaying organic matter in swamps releases methane and phosphine, which can spontaneously ignite when they meet oxygen. These spectral flames hover just above the water, swaying with the wind or skittering away if disturbed. 19th century chemists recreated the effect in labs, proving nature could conjure its own lanterns. But here's the catch. Gas doesn't explain why so many accounts describe wisps leading travelers away from danger only to strand them, or why some cultures insist the lights are the spirits of unbaptized children or murdered wayfarers. Physics might create the light, but human psychology writes the story. Folklore layers on the terror. In Irish tales, the wisps are fairies in disguise, luring victims into their realm. Finnish legends warn of ligtamined, mischievous spirits mimicking lanterns to make drunkards walk into lakes. Even Dante's Inferno features a wisp-like flame tormenting sinners. The unifying thread, these lights don't just mislead, they choose. A Welsh variation claims only the guilty see them, their sins making them susceptible to deception. That moral twist turns a natural phenomenon into a divine test, a way for the landscape itself to judge who deserves safe passage. Modern encounters add chilling wrinkles. In 2009, engineers surveying a Louisiana bayou with infrared cameras captured floating orbs that dodged their equipment like living things. Indigenous guides with them refused to go further, calling the lights few follet, souls of trappers who drowned in the wetlands. Meanwhile, in Japan's Aokigahara forest, hikers report blue flames that vanish when approached, locals attributing them to Hitodama, the wandering spirits of the dead. Skeptics blame bioluminescent fungi or swamp gas, but no lab can replicate why these lights seem to react to human presence. Perhaps the most haunting theory bridges science and superstition. Some researchers suggest the wisps are an example of Earth lights, rare electromagnetic phenomena that appear near fault lines or decomposing metal deposits. These lights allegedly emit low-frequency radiation, which can induce paranoia or hallucinations, meaning the traveler isn't just lost but altered, their mind conjuring voices or figures to explain the inexplicable glow. It's a feedback loop of fear. The light triggers dread, the dread shapes visions, and the visions pull them deeper into the mire. The wisp endures because it lives in that liminal space between fact and nightmare. It's a reminder that nature doesn't need malice to kill, just opportunity, and our own willingness to follow the wrong light. Next time you see something glowing in the dark, ask yourself, is it a spark waiting to be understood or a story waiting to claim you? Either way, stand very still. The wisps are watching. The Rat King isn't just a grotesque curiosity, it's a tangled knot of horror, history, and human guilt. Imagine stumbling upon a writhing mass of rats, their tails fused together by blood, filth, and fate, crawling as one monstrous entity. These real-life aberrations, documented since the Middle Ages, blur the line between nature and nightmare. But what makes them truly unsettling isn't their existence, it's what we've projected onto them. Medieval Europeans saw rat kings as omens of impending doom, their twisted bodies mirroring the chaos of plague-ridden streets. The Black Death wasn't just a disease, it was a moral reckoning, and these rodent abominations became scapegoats for society's sins. Dive into the biology behind the phenomenon, and the mystery deepens. Rat kings occur when young rodents, nesting in cramped, damp spaces, accidentally knot their tails together with sticky substances like sap or fecal matter. As they struggle, the binds tighten, fusing their skin and cartilage into a single, snarled root. Museums across Europe preserve these macabre specimens. The largest, housed in Germany's Mauritianum, features 32 rats eternally bound in a grotesque wheel. Scientists debate whether surviving rat kings can actually move as one, but historical accounts insist they do, dragging themselves in eerie unison toward grain stores or, worse, into homes. The symbolic weight of these creatures is where the myth takes flight. In Slavic folklore, a rat king sighting heralded famine or war, its very presence corrupting the land. Danish farmers believed killing one would bring worse misfortune, like executing a cursed monarch. Even the name Rat King, from the German Rattenkönig, drips with irony, suggesting rulership over a kingdom of filth and decay. This wasn't just superstition, it was a coping mechanism. When the plague erased entire towns, people needed a villain they could see something to blame besides God or their own squalor. The Rat King, with its unnatural unity, became a perfect metaphor for societal collapse. Modern culture hasn't let the myth rest. Literature like Terry Pratchett's The Amazing Morris reimagines rat kings as puppet masters controlling rodent armies, while horror games like Resident Evil morph them into fleshy abominations. Yet the most haunting legacy lies in psychology. The Rat King mirrors our collective fears of entanglement, of being trapped by forces beyond our control, whether pandemics, oppressive systems, or even our own choices. In an era of global crises, the image resonates anew, a tangled mass struggling together yet going nowhere. Perhaps the truth we avoid is this: the Rat King isn't the omen. It's the aftermath, a reflection of what happens when desperation binds us, limb to limb, tail to tail, in a cycle we can't gnaw ourselves free from. The real horror isn't the creature in the cellar, it's recognizing how easily we become it. From the firelit caves of our ancestors to the glow of modern screens, these myths aren't just stories. They're the fingerprints of humanity's deepest fears, wildest dreams, and most unshakable questions. Whether it's the terror of the Wendigo warning against the hunger that consumes us, or the tragic Selkie reminding us that some freedoms can never be stolen, these legends shape civilizations as much as wars or inventions do. They're the threads woven into our collective psyche, binding cultures across oceans and centuries with eerily similar tales of gods, monsters, and the thin line between them. What's fascinating isn't just the stories themselves, it's how they evolve. The same Amazons feared by ancient Greeks become symbols of empowerment today. The bunyip, once a colonial boogeyman, is reclaimed as a guardian of ecological balance. Even the humble will-o'-the-wisp shifts from fairy trickery to a metaphor for the illusions that lead us astray. These myths aren't static relics, they're alive, adapting to reflect each generation's anxieties and aspirations. So why do we cling to them? Science explains the world's mechanics, but myths explain its meaning. They give shape to the formless, the dread of the dark, the mystery of death, the allure of the unknown. They're the original augmented reality, layering wonder over the mundane, turning a storm into a thunderbird's wrath or a desert into Atlantis's grave. And in an age of satellites and algorithms, they remind us that some truths aren't found in data, but in the stories we can't stop telling. Now it's your turn. Which of these legends haunts your imagination? Have you stood where myth and history blur, like the labyrinth of Knossos or the misty shores of Loch Ness? Drop your favorites in the comments. We're just scratching the surface, because next time we're diving into history's greatest unsolved puzzles, vanished civilizations, cryptic artifacts, and enigmas that defy explanation. The past isn't done speaking, and neither are we.